Today on Yeti at Large, some insights into citizen journalism and what it means to record people.
Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out.
So with the rise of popularity of citizen journalism, police body cam videos, and a lot of the examples that we've seen from Project Veritas with investigative reporting, one of the topics that comes up that I've thought about a lot is one-party consent. And that talks about when recording somebody, intercepting audio, electronic communications, that many states, not all, have a standard that at least one party involved in the communication must consent to the recording. So that being said, the concept of wearing a hidden body camera and recording a conversation with somebody in the terms of investigative journalism has become very popular, but it's not always legal and it's not always right. And there's some times where you should be very careful with how you do that if you're considering that. The first thing I would tell you is that you should know and research the laws in your jurisdiction, whether you're in the United States or abroad or what state you're in. This example only applies to Arizona, and nothing I'm telling you here constitutes legal advice, instruction, or guidance. This is just some observations from a layman's point of view. One of the things I've told everybody on this channel, if you followed us for any length of time, is to go to your legal statutes. In Arizona, it's the Arizona Revised Statutes. Every state's going to be slightly different. And if you go to your statutes under Title 13, that's what's known as mostly the criminal code. Chapter 30, that would talk about communications and eavesdropping. And I wrote it down specifically here because I want to be able to quote it. But if you go to ARS 13-300-53012, Section 9, it can really talk about what that one-party consent means. Now, if I'm wearing a body camera and I have an interaction with somebody, I've established that standard of consent for one of the parties involved in that. Unless that individual has a reasonable expectation to privacy. And you'll see in the chapters and paragraphs in those statutes that there are places where people would have a reasonable expectation to privacy. Locker rooms being first and foremost, and there's specific language that prevents that. And the disclosure of anything that would be considered indecent wouldn't be appropriate either. So you'll see a lot of those investigative journalism, body cam footage, secret cam footage is highly redacted to prevent those illegal disclosures. So once we know that law and we decide to work on that, and you want to do citizen journalism and stuff like that, there's a great number of options available to you. This example, what I'm showing you here, is actually many, many years old. This rig is set up that this is what I used to put into my luggage. There's a GPS tracker with a transmitter on here that would broadcast the location of my luggage. If you have an iPhone now, you can buy those little pucks that have all of that self-contained. It'll do that for you. This is an MUVI camera. These were state-of-the-art a few years ago. And it has a Vox, VOX option on it that's voice activated. And then I have a battery backup power here so that this doesn't lose power over time. And if I turn that on and place this in my luggage, I could have this where I would know where my luggage was at all times, and if someone was to get into my luggage, I could record them. Now, anybody opening my luggage doesn't have a reasonable expectation of privacy regardless of what state they're in. And being in public safety, as I was a lot of times, flying with a firearm is not that unusual. Keeping tabs on that firearm was of the utmost gravity. So this was an example of a setup that I used to travel with. But that being said, this has a battery, self-contained. There's a 32 gig micro card in here. And before body cameras were commonly issued to police officers, many of us saw the advantage of having a body camera while we were on duty. Now, automatically, if I'm on duty with a law enforcement agency and any video or audio that I record, by default becomes property of that agency. This isn't my own video and I couldn't use it just however I saw fit. There are very careful rules and disclosures that are involved in that. Now, with the issuance of body cameras from several different companies, a lot of the control and the access and the ability to edit, delete, and modify and view those videos is highly regulated and controlled. So that's taken on a whole nother step of that, which made this obsolete being on duty anymore. But that being said, this little camera can be very handy. I've left it in my vehicle when it was parked, left it on the box, the voice or motion activated sensor. Now you can buy these types of cameras that are embedded in your GPS unit like a Garmin, and it works like a dash cam, which is a excellent thing to have if you spend any amount of time commuting in traffic and whatnot. It can really serve to defend your actions should you be involved in litigation, involved with an accident, something like that, or a break-in or carjacking, etc., etc. So wherever you're at, please go to those statutes, learn those laws, look at the precedent on how, if any of those cases have been tried, but also understand that surreptitiously just videotaping people has such a limited scope where it's ethically acceptable and the etiquette is appropriate in that. For example, in your workplace, there may be very strict policies about recording anybody in the workplace. I wouldn't recommend trying that without knowing those policies very clearly. I know schools may have different standards and statutes, so wherever you're at in the environment, you need to know if people have a reasonable expectation to privacy, if there's policies or procedures with your at-will employment or educational facility, healthcare, locker rooms, anywhere someone's compromised that may have some level of a reasonable expectation of privacy. You really need to think twice about that and make sure that you're not violating the ethics and the etiquette of what you would call citizen journalism. Now, you've seen a lot of auditing type channels that make a point of trying to film police on traffic stops and things like that. And there does become a standard that comes into play when your actions, your activity of filming a traffic stop could A, create a public safety risk, B, interfere with an officer in the lawful commission of their duties, or C, violate a person's reasonable expectation of privacy. So you've gone down that path and you researched the law in your jurisdiction to confirm that you are in a position where you can legally record people under a one-party consent statute. You've discovered that your ethics and your etiquette are appropriate for the environment that you're dealing with. You're not violating any company or organizational policies that you could be subject to for recording people, and that the people that you're recording do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So the last word on this short video is the power of a knowing admission. And when I say with that, a lot of undercover investigative reporting is going to be challenged by people saying, I didn't know I was being recorded, my comments were taken out of context, they've been selectively edited, they've cherry-picked a few comments, and it can discredit the powerful work that you may have an opportunity to do with something newsworthy that you've uncovered. It's not in every situation, because almost universally, if you explain to somebody who knows they're acting outside of the color of law or their organization's policy, if you instruct them, hey, I'm recording this, they're going to stop talking, and that's the end of the interaction right then and there. That being said, there are those occasions where you should carefully consider the power and the legitimacy of that admission. Hey, just so you know, I'm here to talk to you. I identify as a citizen journalist and I'm recording this. What do you have to say about X, Y, and Z? If they keep talking to you, and you would be surprised, sometimes they will, the power of that knowing admission. Yeah, I knew I was being recorded and I kept talking anyway. It's powerful stuff. Sometimes I've seen people do that halfway through the discussion, and then it changes their demeanor immediately and they start walking back those statements. Other times, it's the end of the discussion right away. You need to make those decisions based on your own circumstances. We can't help you with that here. We're just taking a brief look at a budding topic. The other thing that's angled with that is you need to be very, very careful and consider the safety of the environment. I would not put yourself in a position where you can be exposed to physical harm, legal risk, and or reputational risk. But that being said, a lot of people behave differently now, knowing that there's a camera on every corner